everyone, welcome to Briar Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker, and tonight it is my privilege to have acclaimed author with us, Francine Witte. Francine, welcome to our program.
Oh, thank you so much, Becky. It's delightful to be here.
Francine is an incredibly busy literary professional. She's a writer, a host, a poet. She lists and does all kinds of poetry sessions with all kinds of authors. She's the editor of Flash Boulevard and South Florida Poetry Journal and writes her own collections. Francine, how do you have time to manage all of these? Can you tell us how you do that?
Well, um, I'm really big on to-do lists and just kind of blocking out what I need to do. And just even if it's just I tackle a little bit of it. Let's say, for example, I know I have the deadline for the South Florida Poetry Journal. I have to have all those acceptances and declines in. So I'll do a few a day. Like I'll just look at a few of them a day. So it's I don't sit down and say I'm going to do this whole thing right now. So breaking it into little smaller pieces helps me a lot.
Well, I want to thank you on behalf of the literary world for all that you do to promote writers. But I wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what is your background?
Well, I was a New York City high school English teacher for 20 years and I retired about 9 years ago. So I've had more time to dedicate to what I was already doing. I started writing back like I would say in the 80s. And I got my MFA in poetry at Vermont College,
Hmm.
which is a like a long distance MFA where you work with someone through at the time it was snail mail. It's kind of funny now, but send in a packet of maybe four poems and get feedback on it and do rewrites and send them back and forth like that. And then every 6 months you go to a wonderful residency, which was like a writers conference for 2 weeks. And it was great. And I learned so much there. So I got my MFA in poetry. I also liked, I like playwriting. I got very attracted to playwriting. Problem with playwriting is that you have to have someone to produce your plays, you know? Um, so that gets a little bit, tiresome after a while. And then I got into flash fiction. I started taking a class at, I live in New York City here, and I started taking a class at the West Side Y with Roberta Allen, who's like one of the OGs, as my students would say, of Flash. And I just really got so interested in it. And so then I finished my teaching career, and now I've been back to it. So that's basically where I'm at. And I, you know, I like to do all of it. I like to write. I like to go to readings. I like to do Zoom readings. So yeah.
What does poetry mean to you?
Well, it's a good way to say a lot of things that I wouldn't really say in real life, or that someone might not want to listen to. And I don't mean that my poems are. I mean, I think everything is autobiographical
Hmm.
on some level because it's something that you've seen or you've taken in, or you've known someone who was like that. And then, if you're writing fiction or poetry, you kind of blend that into like some other story.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, but I get to say things like, "Oh, this person was an idiot," you know, like I can have a character that's like this person, you know, and I can kind of exaggerate them,
Hmm.
or something like that. So and I love to play with language, and that's really fun to do. I really love, like, I mean, I think most writers will agree that part of the fun is like finding that right word, or just like even if it's like one syllable too long, it's that poring over that little detail. It's so much fun to do that. So
And do you do a lot of research in your writing when whether you're doing flash fiction or you're writing poetry?
Well, that's a good question. For example, I was writing I was writing a poem um, about I forget what the topic was. I was writing it yesterday, and I wanted to know if something was true or not. So I had to look it up. I mean, something like, do bears shed in the winter? Something like that. Like if I'm writing that and I'm trying to use that as a metaphor, okay, but I have to make sure it's factually true. So I do end up doing a lot of research in that way. I'm not the kind of writer that I, I I don't really depend a lot on place or historical things like that. But I do want what I'm saying to be true, to ring true. So
Not too fanciful.
yeah.
Yeah, unless you're writing a specifically a fantasy type piece.
Right, but you have to have even if you're using a metaphor, you sort of have to nail that down in reality on some level. So if I said the thing about the bears and then someone said, well, that's not true. Bears don't shed in the winter. There goes the whole metaphor.
You're like, it's gone, it's
So
lost.
right. So that kind of thing, I'm very careful to research. I call it fact checking. I have to fact check my poems.
So, what advice, Francine, would you give to that aspiring writer who is just starting out? Maybe hasn't gotten anything accepted yet, but they've been writing since they were like two. And so, what would you tell them to propel them forward?
Well, I would say, um, first of all, read. Even if you're only reading what the kind of writing you want to do. I don't happen to read a lot of novels because it's just not my thing to read novels. I'm sorry to all the novel writers out there, but um, I've never tried to write a novel. It's just I don't know. So I would say, but I read a lot of flash and I read a lot of poetry and I read a lot of short stories because that's what
That's
I'm interested
your
in. So,
wheelhouse.
right. So read in your genre, like read what's being published now. There's so many ways to do that. You don't need to even be spending money or going to the library. If you're on Blue Sky or if you're on Facebook, there's plenty of people getting things published, and there are a lot of journals,
Hmm.
a lot of online journals, which is wonderful because the more journals there are, the more opportunities there are. So that's wonderful too. So I would say read. And then when you find something that you think, oh, you know what? This journal looks like they have stories that like kind of things that I'm writing, or the same kind of poems that I'm writing, or my poems are better than that sort of thing. Then try submitting, try sending it out. You have nothing to lose by submitting your poetry or your flash. Nothing at all. It's like, um, I mean, I know there's a lot of, discussion about paying for submission fees, but even at that, when I was first submitting, we had to use postage um, and ink and a self-addressed stamped envelope. So you're already spending $2, $3. So I have no problem with it. It personally doesn't bother me, but I can understand it as a deal breaker for some people. But there are enough journals that you don't have to do that. Um, and I would also say try to get into some sort of community, whether it's taking a workshop or you form a little writers group yourself, you know, just so that you're around like-minded people. Um, not, not so much for critiques, but just to have someone validating what you're doing. And so I think that's important,
Well,
relationship.
and that's why I really like the fact that you host F-Bomb, and
Mhm.
because you have such a wide variety of people who present their work. Tell us, how did you become involved with F-Bomb?
Well, F-Bomb was, created by Paul Beckman, wonderful flash fiction writer and just a really great person. Um, and there had, I think there was an F-Bomb in Colorado, and I'm not sure if but run by Nancy Stallman, another wonderful flash fiction writer. And I think Paul started the New York City, branch, if you will. So he was doing it at a bar here called the KGB bar, which is a very renowned, has a great literary history. They've had wonderful people read there. And he was doing it there the first Friday night of the month. He'd have about, maybe 10 or so writers come and read.
Hmm.
And then COVID, you know,
Changed everything.
COVID did what COVID did. And so Paul moved it to Zoom. And I think he found, and I know that I thought this was true, that he was able to get people from everywhere. When he was just doing it here in New York City, he only had access to people who were willing to be in New York City or who
Hmm.
lived here, or every so often, there'd be a special night or something like that. I remember Nancy Stallman came to read, and so he had a lot of people here for that. So then he moved it to Zoom, and he was doing it. And every so often he would ask me if I would want to host for him because he was busy or he was going away. And so I did. And then he asked me to co-host with him to share the reading, and I did. And about a few months ago, you know, he decided to just back away, and now I do it.
And how has that impacted you?
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I do another Zoom reading also, um, called the Prose Garden,
Right.
which is a similar type of reading, but I co-host it with Meg Pokris,
Hmm.
a wonderful flash fiction writer and a great friend. And so we do that once a month also. So I'm doing two readings a month, and I love it because I just get to reach out to all these people that I really love their work and say, you want to read, and I love assembling the groups of people, like this person will go, they'll read well, and then they'll pair well with each other, so I really love it. It's not.
Francine, tell me about, let's move forward. Like, when Zoom changed everything. It's like it took this great um world that's huge and made it smaller so people could connect more. But if you were to flash forward 100 years from now, with our technology that we have now, especially with books being on Kindle and other things, how do you think the world's going to look literary wise?
That's a really good question. Um, Now you bring up Kindle. I love Kindle books, which you know, is not always the popular thing to say, but I find it easier to like just sit and I just have I have it on my iPad, and so I just have it on my iPad and hit the turn the. I'm just too lazy to even turn the book, turn the pages. That's really bad.
I'm the
But
same way.
yeah, but so I've seen the difference in just 30 or 40 years. I was reading longer than that, but I mean, just as long as I've been looking at literary journals and so on, how much has changed. It's changed in terms of, the kinds of journals that there are. When
Hmm.
I was first starting out, there were only print journals, and you had to mail your submissions in, and you had to wait to get responses, and that was the only way you could communicate with the editors. Um, So that changed a lot. Zoom, of course. So given that kind of trajectory, I kind of think that um, I, you know I think books will be maybe the move towards audiobooks maybe might be more
Mhm.
prevalent. Um, I think, I don't know because people seem to read no matter what. You know, it's like you would think that you don't have to read anymore, but people seem to want to read. Um, so I think it'll be okay. I just think that, the ways that books are presented might be different.
Like maybe even holographic in nature. You
Yeah,
never know. Like
why
we might
not?
actually
Like,
see a little holographic Francine reading her flash fiction.
that's
Wouldn't that be cool?
really, I'm, I'm all for technology. I'm all in favor of everything. So, you know, I'm not in favor of AI writing people's stories.
Oh,
That's a problem. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's going to have an effect on the literary world because I think there's opportunities for people to just say, not so much in with literary writing,
hmm
but with genre writing. Someone could say, "Oh, write a novel about Texas for me that'll be a bestseller." And I think some people won't even care if it was written by AI. If it's entertaining to them. So people have all different kinds of reasons for reading, and the kinds of things that they like to read. So I think yes, I think AI is going to be
it'll be
be playing a
predominant.
big, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, humans will be able to be like the cavemen and go, no, no, no. Um, well, Francine, do me a favor if you don't mind and read some of your work for us.
I'm going to start with this was a prose poem and Elm Leaves Journal, and it's a prose poem, and they did an issue on the eclipse.
Okay.
That was so. This is called Slide of Moon. Slowly across the sun's yellow flower face, and we can't help but gather ourselves wisps of ghostly dandelion spores. We are clustered, our necks tilting away from that flat earth of our everyday. We cover our eyes with special glasses, dare to peek through pinhole viewers, and we briefly remember we are little more than bits on a gallery sash. We are flyaway in passing, flipped off the moment we die. But here we are today for this one single held breath, with songbirds going silent, and we huddle together back into that single organism we were maybe meant to be, brought together in the day dark as the moon closes off the sun like some giant held up thumb. The eclipse and us going total, and we aren't scared, not even for a second. And then the whole thing passes back to normal, the moon going back to its part of the sky, and we scatter back apart like some unseen wish breath was blowing on us. We go back to our separate lives, the fear of death eclipsed again, like always. We forget the fact that one day, billions of eons from now, the sun will be hidden again, fade, dying flower, blacked out forever and gone. And then this poem is called The River's Wife. I've always liked those poems that are like the something's wife, you know, carpenter's wife. I always find those very
hmm
interesting, so I figured I'd write one. And it's called The River's Wife. Each night I ask him if he still loves me. He tells me instead how he started, handfuls of rain and mountain streams, how it trickled into a muscled flow. I ask him again, and that's when he goes back to hiss and spin. I give up and head home, lonely, cutting my feet on scrags of rocks and fallen twigs. Some nights I wake up, go to the kitchen, turn on the faucet full blast, water fingers lacing my own. My father warned me, said that the river is made up of tears from all the fish that never made it out to sea. He said that he was a river once, a foaming, raging twist of a man who lured my mother from the banks, how she gave up, girl-like, to his tumble and roar, how I myself am part river, how if I listen close enough, I can hear the whoosh that is louder than the beating of my heart. And I took a workshop with a good friend of mine, Pamela Painter, who's a wonderful writer. And the prompt was write a road trip story. And I love road trip stories. I've written quite a few of them. So this is what I came up with. Just another road trip story. Throw in a woman, throw in a man, throw in a broke down Chevy, throw in a body in the trunk. Throw in a gas station, bramble and brush, hopper pumps and rattlesnake shiver. Throw in the hot armpit sun. Throw in the woman's husband, who of course is in the trunk. Throw in the way you eyed the DoorDash guy. No, that's another story. Throw in Arizona. A road trip story is always Arizona. Desert and plump of dune in the background. The man, the woman, the husband in the trunk pulling into the gas station. Throw in a lonely pop machine where only a quarter will roll out a Coke as crisp and cold as movie Christmas. Throw in the gas station attendant about to open the trunk. I'm going to check the spare for air, he probably says. Throw in the way your husband doesn't look at you anymore, not with anything close to desire. Throw in how you kind of sort of understand the woman in the road trip story and whatever she did to put her husband in the trunk. Throw in the man throwing his meat fist on the trunk. Thanks anyway, old man, we just need gas. Throw in the smell of rotting corpse working into the Arizona air. Throw in how your husband goes corpse when you tell him your life is a desert and his love would be like water. Throw in the gas station attendant going fisheye with suspicion. Throw in how he sidles inside and rings up the sheriff. Throw in a shootout at the end of the road. Throw in your refrigerator, Dune in the background. Throw in no one there to check if anything needs air. Throw in you just sitting there with no idea how this story will end.
Mm. Francine, do you remember how long it took you to write that?
That one just came out. That one just came out. Sometimes you get those little gifts, you know. Once I had gotten the structure of it, the throw in the, you know,
Yeah, that was
um,
really cool, the cadence of that.
and it just like often something like that, I do these prompt classes,
Hmm.
and I'll teach a lot about repetition and what they call the single sentence paragraph. It just has this forward motion that allows you to go very fast, allows you to just write something in one breath almost. This is called cab ride. The meter starts, numbers twisting and ticking away, and it doesn't matter because numbers are a made up thing, like love. The city outside whirs by, men hammering buildings together, baby carriages and store signs, all of it blurry and Monet. I'll put this painting in my head with the others. The cab driver is 55 or 80, a hug of gray hair around his head. I don't think much about cab drivers. I figure they like it that way. My mother, of course, is dying. The cab driver drives past the hospital. Wait, I tell him, I said St. Elizabeth's. I know, he says, switching off the meter. Let's go look at the river instead. I've heard things like this. I've heard of things like this, kidnappings, hijackings. One minute my mother was asking if I wanted my eggs scrambled or fried. The cab driver's eyes in the rear view, Hospitals can wait a few minutes, he says. My daughter, he continues, she was only 5. When we get to the river, the slap of an autumn morning as we step out of the cab, all around us, the usual joggers, the seagulls climbing the sky. Those birds, he says, they have this sense of direction. It's built into their wings. We get back into the cab. We head to the hospital. I open the window and let in a whoosh of air, a sudden swoop underneath my arms. This is called fish sweat, which is just like a silly word. Fish sweat. All over the counter in our bungalow kitchen, my mother bandana tying up her tired hair. My mother asking me how bad I want to eat. These fish are a mess, she says, all slime and goo and fish sweat. No such thing as fish sweat, I think, but my mother has never, not once in her life, called a thing what it really is. Every so often, she stops to stare out the gingham window to see if my father's car is pulling up. He said he was going back to that fishing shack we stopped at last night and to pick up some bait, where he asked the young woman who ran it what was the best spot in the fish on to fish on the lake. How we all of us heard her say how she's running the shack by herself since her husband died, her tan belly showing out from her midriff top. And then my father going out by himself early this morning, coming back with 5 whole fish, each one slimier and smellier than the one before it, and me having exactly no appetite, not after watching the sweat trickle out of my mother's bandana, her wiping it off with the back of her rubber gloved hand, her whacking the heads off the fish one by one and tossing them into a bucket like they were somebody's father, somebody's husband, and me standing there next to her, wondering exactly how many fish this is going to take.
Francine, you are so talented. I mean, you've given us so many different types of stories. You're just amazing. Tell us where we can find your work.
Well, I do have a website that needs a little bit of updating, but there's quite a bit to get started with. It's francinewitte.com, just my name.com. And I've got, let's see, I've got stories, I've got poems, I've got, there's places like if you were interested in purchasing my books, there are links to that. There's a place to contact me. And, also if you wanted to find out about my prompt sessions, there's a link to, just contact me and you can ask about those. I do these prompt sessions maybe about once every 2 weeks, and I call them pop-up prompts because they're just whenever I feel like doing it. And I have a nice group of people that seem to keep coming back. So,
Oh, that's really good.
and they're open
And
to, all age, all levels, and
and you can also find Francine on YouTube. Just type in Francine Witt, and there's all kinds of tremendous interviews and poetry prompt sessions and everything there. So just make sure you Google her because she's pretty amazing. Tell us what projects you're currently working on.
well, I'm always working on poetry and flash. I write pretty much every day. Not that long every day, maybe a half hour, but I just keep at it. And that's basically it. Nothing new. I mean, I'm always thinking in terms of, writing things, putting them out for publication, and then at some point I'll say, oh, maybe I'll put these together in a manuscript. So,
Well, we'll keep watching and seeing your work because I know for a fact that you've had several pieces accepted lately. So congratulations on that. Well, thank you again, Francine.
thank you, Becky. This has really been fun.